Hello and welcome to the latest Talking City podcast with myself, Alex James, and City writer Tyrone Marshall. We will delve back into the return of domestic football in just a minute, but a quick word from our sponsors, NordVPN. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/Talking City. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on a 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and the link is in the podcast episode description box. Tyrone, are you well?
I'm good, mate. Yeah, good, thank you. It's been a while, hasn't it?
The eagle-eyed of you will know that we're recording this the same time as we recorded our Monday podcast. We were just debating a Beyonce-style costume change, but we are recording this on earlier in the week ahead of the Newcastle game, partly because of scheduling, partly because we're going to do something a little bit different today and bring you a bit of an insight into Newcastle and City with our colleagues in the Northeast. So Tyrone will be bringing you that shortly. But the Premier League is back. Feels like a long time since that Liverpool game, actually.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I guess it was a shame it stopped, wasn't it, for City?
Yeah.
Who kind of built up some momentum again after that Villa game with those 4 straight wins, 3 goals in all of them, and the Liverpool game was obviously brilliant. So yeah, bit of a shame it came to a halt, but it is back, and it feels like this kind of signalled the best bit of the season, but
yeah, the meat of the season.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, like
we've had the bread at the start, now we're putting the meat in the sandwich.
We're putting the meat in. Yeah. Apologies to any vegan listeners. But yeah, this is kind of this spell between now and the March international break. Yeah, it's like it's non-stop. Really,
the tofu of the
This is like the heart of the season, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a schedule that is pretty hectic for City. Well, for more than just City, but I think something like 19 games between now and the end of January in just over 2 months in what will be 4 competitions. But it's a huge opportunity for City because I feel like they've played, they've obviously played Arsenal and Liverpool, played the derby. They have played a few of their so-called bigger hitters. They played Spurs. Therefore, on paper, there's an opportunity for them to string a few wins together.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the end of January. So does that include a Carabao Cup semi-final? Or would those games would be added in, I presume?
They would be added in, but I don't know when 21.
They are. I don't know when they are. I presume they're in January. I presume it's still 2 legs as well. Feels like they're going to change that every year. Yeah. So yeah, it could be even busier. But yeah, it's also a great chance just because they've got momentum now. 1 defeat in 14. The way they recovered from that defeat, I think, has really buoyed Guardiola. And it's going to be interesting this run, I guess, to see kind of how he rotates his squad, because we've spoken a lot about how this is a deeper squad than he's arguably ever had at City. It's also, you compare it now to last year and this stage last year when the wheels were coming off big time and everyone was injured and you were fielding, it's only, what is it, about 3 weeks now since the year anniversary of that Southampton game where there was like 7 players on the bench, I think, 2 of which were keepers. Like, you couldn't fill a bench against Southampton, and Southampton could, and it kind of shows you how badly that squad had been damaged by injuries. Whereas this year, everyone seems to be staying fit. Obviously, Rodri's got his ongoing issues. Kovacic as well is having problems. But other than that, I think everyone's fit at the moment.
I think it's only Kovacic who's sort of a certain absence.
Kovacic is long term. Obviously, we wait and see on Rodri. Obviously, Guardiola's press conference will be Friday, so we'll see what he says on Rodri, and hopefully everyone comes back from internationals fit and fine. But that's a squad depth of, if Rodri was available, you would have 2 players forever. You'd have 2 first 11s of international players there, probably. So there's a lot of options, and obviously he'll rotate against Brentford in the Carabao Cup. I think that much is a guarantee, but there's options there to rotate elsewhere, isn't there? And I think we're going to see strong teams against Newcastle. We're going to see a strong team against Bayer Leverkusen. Obviously going to see a strong team in Madrid, but maybe as you go into this run, some of those league fixtures get a little easier. You get to the January Champions League games. If City are assured of top 8, maybe you see some changes. I think we've spoken previously about Bodo Glimt. You probably want to rest a few players from that trip. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how he manages his squad over the next couple of months.
I think that I've got a feeling that Bodo Glimt game is either just after the derby or just before the derby as well, which might, and obviously it's at the Arctic Circle. So if you can spare a few players that journey, then you probably will. And because it was only in, I think, April, May, where Guardiola half jokingly said, I don't want a bigger squad.
Yeah.
Don't want to leave all these players in the fridge, which is a lovely analogy. But there are players in the fridge. And it's not just Calvin Phillips in the fridge. There's players who, I think it was Kushnov who was left out of the squad for the Liverpool game when 6 weeks ago he was starting and impressing at right back and been perhaps a suggestion of a long-term option in that position. Now he's not in the match day 20, is it these days?
20, yeah.
And that's without Rodri and Kovacic. I know Kovacic isn't going to be around for a few months anyway, but...
Was Oscar Bob in the squad against Liverpool?
I can't remember. Phil
can't
like he was, but maybe he wasn't. But I think there's 25, 26 senior players, and if you take Phillips out, who's obviously out of favour, and 2 keepers really out of that, like you say, you're still on 22,
you're still
23.
Probably leaving 2 out of a squad every match day. And it is. It is funny that Guardiola said last year a lot that I don't want a bigger squad.
But it feels like he needs. I don't know whether he's realised that a little bit, or City of a club have realised that.
I think in a way, I think it's probably circumstances. I think he'd have probably liked to have sold more players than they did in the summer. Obviously, they would have liked to have sold Ortega.
Yeah,
maybe Phillips, Ortega, I guess, and maybe one other. But I think it's beneficial now. It's here, and I don't think he's not leaving players out that are kind of been there, done that, treble winners, are they? I guess he can sell the decision to Bob and Kusanov a bit better.
Yeah, that is true.
Albeit they might become
to Jack Grealish
frustrated.
At the end of
yeah. And even I suppose probably Nathan Ake is probably kind of on that precipice, isn't it? He might be out of a squad every now and again, and I guess he's achieved a lot. But yeah, I think it's worked out pretty well that they have got this deep squad. And as the season goes on, and certainly in this stage of the season now, it's probably going to be needed.
Yeah, especially when you look at what Arsenal have done in terms of. I mean, Arsenal's squad is probably as strong as it's ever been.
Yeah, I think they've got great depth. But I mean, City
Liverpool spent 400 million. I know their squad probably isn't quite as deep as
no
kind of 15 to 20 players.
Yeah, well, that's it.
The same level of
it feels more unbalanced, doesn't it? And they've got Joe Gomez is their third centre half, and their only other centre half. That it's clearly like an unbalanced squad. But you look at City. We were speaking before about you could swap every player really without a major drop off in quality. I mean, you look at Reinders, who I think's had a pretty good season. Probably should have scored more.
Reinders has been a bit undone by playing so well in his first game, I think.
Maybe, yeah. And I think it feels like he has a chance every game to score and doesn't take it. But I think he's done okay. But now because Cherki's playing so well and Foden's playing so well, Reinders is suddenly out the team. I mean, he's a great option to bring off the bench. John Stones is probably the third choice centre back. Is a great option to have. You could play Kusanov or Lewis coming in at right back, Nori coming in at left back. Savino's a backup winger now. There's so much depth there. And even if Rodri came back and you could have Gonzalez as backup to him when, Nico Gonzalez has had a really good 6 weeks or so. Or arguably, play Gonzalez and have Rodri on the bench to ease his way back in.
Exactly.
It feels like it feels like you could make 10 changes to that team without a huge drop-off in quality. I think the one we touched on Monday's pod is Haaland, isn't it? You take Haaland out for Marmoush, and there's clearly going to be a bigger drop-off in quality there just because he's scoring.
Yeah, just because
so many of City's goals. But there's enough of a squad there to think that you can rest and rotate a lot of those players.
Yeah, and Newcastle away, obviously, I mean, Newcastle are struggling domestically, but difficult game. Certainly at St James's, and you spoke before then about City having a little bit of the momentum from Liverpool, then checked by 2 weeks of international football. But if you can go to the Northeast and get 3 points, that just really drives that momentum home. And then you go into a run of so many games, and then a few winnable games. Leeds, Fulham, I think, are the next 2 after that, aren't they? That you would expect 6 points from. That's nicely timed for a winter run and trying to chase down Arsenal.
Yeah, it is. And the Newcastle game's probably big for that, isn't it? Keeping that momentum going. It's not. It is a tough place to go, especially on a 5:30 p.m. on a Saturday night. It's going to be noisy, but they are struggling a bit domestically. There's no doubt about that. They've done all right in the Champions League, albeit I think they've had a reasonably easy run of.
Yeah, they lost to Barcelona.
They
beat Benfica, didn't they?
Benfica, beat Union Saint-Gilloise. Those are Europa League wins, aren't they? Rather than Champions League wins, I would say. And like I say, their Premier League results have not been great. I think they're only a couple of points above the relegation zone. But they've got a good squad, and they'll be up for it because they know they need a result. And like I say, 5:30 on Saturday it's an ideal kickoff time at that ground because it's so in the city centre.
Yeah.
And let's face it, they'll all have been on it since midday. So it's going to be pretty noisy and pretty raucous.
Not to stereotype.
Not to stereotype, no. But they'll all be there with their tops off, smashed. So it's going to be a tricky place to go. But if City can get the win, I think it will only kind of add to this belief that's growing.
Well, we'll switch to the northeast now and see if
he's got his top on.
See if they really are. What Tyrone just so candidly suggested, and get a bit of insight from our Newcastle Chronicle colleagues for the sort of lowdown on what City can expect on Saturday.
Right, I'm joined by Andrew Musgrove of the Newcastle Chronicle to give us the Newcastle lowdown ahead of Saturday's game. Andrew, how are we?
I'm good, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, not bad, mate. Not bad at all. Thank you very much. Fill us in on Newcastle's season so far then. From the outside, it looks a pretty weird one and a pretty inconsistent one. Great in Europe, not so great domestically. Is that the sum of it, or is there a bit more going on?
No, I think you've summed it up absolutely perfectly. If we were facing Manchester City in the Champions League, I think we'd be a lot more confident about Saturday. It's just unfortunately hasn't clicked in the Premier League, and we are a lot closer to the relegation zone than the race for Champions League football for next season, which is slightly concerning. They need something to click. It needs to be turned around quickly, and unfortunately, the opponent on Saturday probably isn't the ideal one to be facing when you're in that situation. No, probably not, unfortunately, for you guys. Why has that been the case then? Why have you found it more, as I say, easier, but had better results in Europe than you have in the Premier League? Is there anything you can put your finger on as to why it's happening? It's strange. They have gotten up for the Champions League maybe because of kind of everything that comes with it. The tune that plays beforehand, and it gets the blood pumping and all of that. And even against Barcelona, the Newcastle lost that game, but really should have gone into the interval in the lead. They had a good few chances, which they just didn't take, and inevitably Barcelona came back and won the game. In the Premier League, they just don't seem to have the same application, unfortunately. They've gone ahead in games like West Ham, like Brentford, and then they've ended up losing, and they played particularly poorly on the road. But even at home, when they picked up their wins, they've been against sides who are just below them in the league table, played well against Liverpool, played well against Arsenal, but just couldn't hold out to get anything from those games. It seems to be a bit of a mentality issue, and what the solution is, I'm really not certain. That aside, there's been injuries, and I'm not one to make excuses, but Newcastle United are without their two first choice full-backs in Tino Livramento and Lewis Hall, and that is impacting the threat going forward, because as good as Kieran Trippier is, and as much effort as Dan Burn puts in, they're not Tino Livramento or Lewis Hall, and it impacts the threat on the wings because they're not overlapping, they're not interlinking, and it has had a massive impact. And of course, Yohan Wissa as well, who was signed for best part of £55 million, and we haven't seen him kick a ball yet because he's been injured. So haven't had the option to change it up front, and like I say, are without two key players, but hopefully Lewis Hall will return on Saturday. But as I said earlier, it's probably not the game that you want to return to, given the players you'll be facing.
No, I think Dan Burn's suspended, isn't he? So I guess you'd have to throw him straight back in if he is fit and available. You mentioned the away form there. I mean, at home, it's 5 wins in a row. And the teams you have lost to at St James's, I think it's Liverpool, Arsenal and Barcelona. No shame in that. I mean, City have got a good record against Newcastle, but it feels like the games at St James's are always difficult games. What can they expect from the atmosphere? I mean, is St James still that kind of stronghold for Newcastle? Is that going to be the bedrock of getting this Premier League campaign back on track?
Yeah, the home form's going to be key. Those victories they have picked up in the Premier League, the performances weren't great, but it was kind of all about making sure you do get over the line. A bit better in the Champions League and in the League Cup. But in terms of the atmosphere on Saturday, a late kick-off under the lights, it should be quite boisterous. But I think, an early goal for Manchester City, and that'll quieten the fans right down. And I think there's also a little bit of a trepidation about what's to come. I think people quite rightly do fear Manchester City. So, whether it'll be, that loud and ferocious atmosphere that the fans can provide, or whether it'll already be dampened pre-kick-off because of the expectation of what Man City will bring to the game, we can only wait and see. But look, if the fans are up for this, that of course plays into the Newcastle United starting 11, and that gets the players going. And these players do tend to react to an atmosphere that is loud and that is ferocious. So if the fans can do it and the players can match it, then hopefully that does aid them in what will be a difficult task on Saturday.
Yeah, you mentioned the injuries there, but it was clearly a difficult summer as well for Newcastle, with the Alexander Isak situation dragging on for the whole window. I mean, on the face of it at the moment, it seems that that's turned out to be a very good deal for Newcastle. Isak's obviously made no impact at Liverpool, and eventually got Nick Voltemada in his place, who didn't seem necessarily like the first choice, but has made a flying start to life on Tyneside, hasn't he?
He certainly has, but if you look at the stats, he's had very few efforts on goal. I don't know them off the top of my head, but it's something like, I think, 8 efforts on goal in the Premier League, and he scored 4 of those efforts. So he's proved clinical, but he doesn't get too many chances. And his issue is that he drops deep and wants to be involved in play, which he's very good at. He's a tall man, but he's great with the ball at his feet. His first touch is unbelievable, joy to watch. But the issue is that when he drops deep, at this present point in time, the midfield or the wingers have not then run into that space, and that is proven a real issue. In an ideal world, you would probably have Johan Wissa up top and Voldemort playing as a number 10, but that hasn't happened yet, and it won't happen against Manchester City. And it will likely be rinse and repeat for Newcastle United, where Voldemort does drop deep to try and get involved. And it's then a question of can the midfield and wingers step up to help him out and to get into that space which he vacates when he does win the ball. I'll be honest, I'm not too certain that's going to happen. But that issue aside, he's a brilliant player, bags of talent, quite clearly has a real eye for goal. He's only going to get better, and long may that continue.
Yeah, he certainly looks like value at the moment, doesn't he? Whatever Bayern Munich might be trying to claim. And I mean, Anthony Gordon's a player who's had his moments against City and had success against City. If there is a weakness within this City side at the moment, it is probably at right back with Matthias Nunes, even if he's played well pretty recently. I think Gordon's not guaranteed to be fit and available for this game. What's the view with Gordon at the moment on Newcastle? Because like I said, I think he's a player City look at and think he's a real danger. But in a way, I guess, does he kind of sum up the season and that he's performed brilliantly in the Champions League and maybe not really hit his straps in the Premier League?
Yeah, absolutely. Summed it up perfectly there. He has been brilliant in the Champions League, and he talks about himself as an elite player. He does it with England as well. Domestically, he's been terrible for Newcastle United. Again, I can't remember the stats off the top of my head, but it's something like no assists in the last 19 Premier League games for Newcastle United, and no goals in the Premier League in the last 21. Now, for a man who clearly has an abundance of talent and who clearly thinks a lot of himself, that is not a very good stat whatsoever. So that needs to improve. He might be missing on Saturday because he picked up an injury Initially against West Ham, where he was dreadful. He then did play against Bilbao in the Champions League, but only lasted, I think it was 20, 25 minutes or something like that. He was taken off, didn't feature against Brentford. But Harvey Barnes starred in that position against Brentford and scored a wonderful goal. And I think if you ask Newcastle United fans who they would play if everyone was fit on Saturday, I think a large majority of them would say Harvey Barnes, because I think from my point of view, Anthony Gordon needs to be sent a message. It's not good enough. I don't think Eddie Howe can keep rolling the dice every game that he's fit to be picked and hope it just clicks, because we're a way through the season now and something's got to give. And Harvey Barnes took his chance against Brentford and deserves to start, in my opinion, against Manchester City. Newcastle fans, some of them might argue that this is exactly the kind of game that Anthony Gordon gets up for. And you can say, fine, brilliant. But I think longer term, I'd want to send a message and say, well, that's not good enough. It's not good enough getting up for, the world-class teams. You need to get up for the likes of West Ham and whoever else is down there, the league table fighting for their lives. So if it was me, even if he's fit, I wouldn't be playing him as good as he can be.
Yeah, it's funny when you're only dipping into teams every now and again and maybe seeing Champions League games and things like that. I mean, my perception was that Gordon was doing really well and having a great season. And I was amazed by those Premier League stats you reeled off at his lack of impact, really. And it shows how those, like you say, those big games can maybe skew your thinking. And he's obviously made that left wing spot his own for England, it feels like, and has played really well for England. But obviously not doing it on a weekly basis for Newcastle. Another player that I don't think will be playing this weekend, but has been of interest to City, is Tino Livramento. Obviously someone they looked at the start of the summer. I mentioned the right-back issues for City there. That they've used 3 different right-backs already this season. It looks like Nunes has kind of made that place his own now. Kusanov might well come back and challenge him. It wouldn't surprise me if right-back was still a priority in 2026. I mean, the Livramento deal, once Newcastle got Champions League football, it was never going to go off the ground, really, given the improved financial position there. But how's he been getting on this season?
He's rubbish. Totally rubbish.
Don't go near him.
Nah, I don't know why Man City want him to be honest with you. He's absolutely brilliant. He's actually, funnily enough, in the eyes of some, been a better left back than Lewis Hall has been. He had to fill in at left back since Lewis Hall got injured midway through last season, and he was absolutely superb then. I think it was against Arsenal, and he landed awkwardly on his knee, and we thought, oh goodness me, he got carried off on a stretcher. He looked in a lot of pain. We wondered whether it could be a season-ending injury. Thankfully, it doesn't appear to be, and he will be back, we think, before Christmas. Obviously, that's a really busy time, so that's great news for Newcastle United. But I have to be honest, if Man City want a world-class right-back for many years to come, Tino Livramento is probably that man. He is brilliant defensively, really disciplined, but it's going forward where he really impresses, and he just helps your team get up the field. He's just really creative, and he's a real superstar, and he's got so much more to give, many more levels to go. And if Man City are planning long term for that position, then spending the best part of £100 million on Tino Livramento, I don't think would be the worst decision in the world. And people might laugh at that number, but for me, he's worth at least that, because you've got to think of what he can go on to achieve, how young he is and how good he is right now. I think £100 million would prove to be an absolute bargain, if I'm being totally honest.
Yeah, well, I guess with his age profile, he could be City's right back for 10 or 12 years, really, and homegrown as well. So he ticks a lot of boxes in that regard. So maybe one to keep an eye on in 2026. As for how Newcastle are viewing City, then, who will Newcastle be keeping an eye on and fearful of? And feel free to give the obvious answer, because there probably is only one, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, Erling Haaland's just a joy to watch, isn't he? I think Newcastle United fans will have moved, if they hadn't already, to have him in their fantasy football team. He's certainly in mine and will be my captain this weekend, because you give him a chance and he's more than likely going to put it in the back of the net. I think Malik Thiaw, Newcastle centre back on the right side, has been absolutely superb this season. A few eyebrows raised at the price tag paid for him, but he's looked like a bargain, to be brutally honest with you. And I think he will relish the chance of going up against Erling Haaland, and he'll do his all. And if there's one man who's going to be capable of stopping him, I would say it would be him, given his form. You know, as inconsistent as Newcastle have been in the Premier League, week after week, there's one name that comes out that always has the credit from that performance, and it's Malik Thiaw, because he's just been a superb signing. So I think he will give Haaland a real difficult day of it. Maybe Newcastle might go 5 at the back to try and stop him. I'm not really sure of that. And then, you know, there's other players to mention. I mean, Doku is, again, when you think about players outside of the club you cover or support, and you think about the players who get you on the edge of your seat and who entertain you, then he is one that springs to mind. The goal he scored recently, where he curled it into the top corners, is one I've watched a few times, because it's exactly what you want from your winger. So I'm dreading him, to be quite honest with you. And Phil Foden's another one that I'm not looking forward to seeing. But you could list, you know, one of 11, couldn't you? Really?
Yeah, quite possibly. What's your thoughts for the weekend then? What's your prediction? Is there much confidence in the Northeast of getting a result, or is this one that Newcastle fans are maybe a bit fearful of?
Yeah, I don't think there's much confidence really. Newcastle are on a bit of a bad spell at the moment. Their away form is a dark, gloomy cloud over them. At home, they're a little bit more comfortable, as we've discussed, but I just think it's Manchester City, isn't it? I have to say, though, I was feeling very, very, very negative about Saturday. Then I spoke to yourself before we recorded this for our preview episode, and you left me thinking that it might not be as bad as I first feared, although I still think it's going to be particularly brutal for Newcastle. So City will win. I think it's probably just a case of by how many, if I'm totally honest. I think Newcastle United, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I think, you know, I don't want to sound defeatist, but it's Manchester City, so Newcastle are going to lose on Saturday, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think City will win, but I do think it's going to be a tough game. Like I say, City often have tough games up there, and I think they're going to be capable of throwing in the odd iffy performance this season. I'm not saying it'll come on Saturday, but I think they'll win, but I think they'll have to battle for it. So I'm going 2-1 here. But Andrew, thanks very much for your time, and thanks for joining us on the podcast.
You're welcome.